Here writes a devoted admirer of Bridgerton, one who dwells between memories of the regential past. Today, I invite you to plunge with me into this tale of love, drama, and passion. Picture, if you will, dear listeners, London in the spring of 1834. The air carries the scent of cherry blossoms from Hyde Park, mingling with the coal smoke that perpetually hovers over our beloved city. The cobblestones gleam wet from the morning rain, and carriages roll past with their wheels clicking a rhythm that speaks of society, scandal, and endless possibilities. But tell me, have you ever wondered what happens to the flowers that bloom too delicately for English weather? Meet Lady Evangeline Ashworth, barely 18, and as fragile as morning dew on rose petals. Her golden hair catches the light like spun silk, always arranged in the most delicate of styles that frame her porcelain features. The tongue whispers behind their fans that she's too frail for marriage, too sensitive for the harsh realities of aristocratic life. Her own family, oh, the cruelty of blood relatives, treats her as though she might shatter with the slightest breeze. She never survive a proper marriage, her aunt declares over tea, not caring that Evangeline sits right there, her blue eyes reflecting a pain she's learned to hide. Far too delicate for a man of consequence. But here's what they don't see. Dear ones, sometimes the most delicate flowers have the strongest roots. On this particular morning, Evangeline sits by her bedroom window in Grosvenor Square, watching the world wake up. Her fingers trace patterns on the glass, and if you looked closely, you'd see they spell out words, dreams, hopes, all the things a young woman yearns for but dares not speak aloud. Little does she know, across the square, another soul wrestles with his own demons. Now, let me tell you about His Grace, the Duke of Ravenshollow, though that name alone should tell you something, shouldn't it? Adrian Chun, the most enigmatic figure in all of London society. Picture him, if you can, tall and commanding, with dark hair and features that speak of distant lands and ancient mysteries. His heritage marks him as different in a world that prizes conformity, yet his title demands respect from every corner of the ton. Those who don't know him whisper that he's carved from marble, beautiful, untouchable, and cold. But, oh, how wrong they are. You see, Adrian learned early that armor isn't always made of steel. Sometimes it's made of perfect manners, of words chosen with mathematical precision, of smiles that never quite reach one's eyes. Every morning he dons this invisible armor with the same care other men use to arrange their cravats. Your Grace, his valet murmurs, Lady Pemberton has sent another invitation. The third this week. Adrian's reflection in the mirror shows not a flicker of emotion. Send my regrets, Harrison. The usual excuse will suffice. But what excuse does a duke give for avoiding life itself? The truth, dear listeners, lies buried beneath years of whispered comments about his foreign appearance, the subtle cuts that taught him to build walls higher than any castle. He learned that kindness was often met with exploitation, that vulnerability was seen as weakness. So he became what they expected, distant, untouchable, perfect. Until the morning he glimpsed a golden-haired angel tracing words on a window, and something inside his chest cracked like ice in spring. Have you ever noticed how the most significant moments of our lives often begin with the smallest details? It started with a fallen glove. Evangeline had been walking through Hyde Park with her maid, one of the few activities her family deemed suitable for someone of her delicate constitution. The morning sun painted everything in gold, and for once she felt almost hopeful. Then her glove slipped from her fingers, caught by a gust of wind that seemed determined to play matchmaker. She watched, horrified, as her best silk glove danced through the air like a white butterfly, landing directly at the feet of a tall gentleman who had been walking alone. "Oh no," she whispered, her cheeks flaming. The gentleman bent to retrieve it, and when he straightened, Evangeline found herself staring into the most extraordinary dark eyes she'd ever seen. For a moment, just a heartbeat, she saw something flicker there. Surprise? Recognition? Wonder? "I believe this belongs to you, my lady," Adrian said, his voice carrying that cultured precision that made society matrons swoon. But here's what made Evangeline's breath catch. He didn't just hand her the glove. He held it as though it were made of butterfly wings, as though it mattered. "Thank you, Your Grace," she managed, though her voice came out smaller than she intended. Their fingers brushed as she took the glove, and both felt it, that electric spark that romance novels try so desperately to capture but rarely achieve. "Forgive me," Adrian said, and something in his tone made her look up sharply. "But you seem... Are you quite well?" "You look as though you might faint." Another man might have walked away. Another man might have seen her fragility as weakness. Instead, Adrian saw what others missed. The quick intelligence in her eyes, the way her chin lifted despite her trembling hands, the steel beneath the silk. "I'm perfectly fine," Evangeline lied, because that's what she'd been taught to do. "Of course you are," Adrian replied, but his tone suggested he understood the lie and forgave it. "Though perhaps you might benefit from sitting for a moment. There's a lovely bench just there, beneath the oak tree." And so began the first of many conversations that would change both their lives forever. Over the following weeks, these chance encounters became less chance and more deliberate. Adrian found himself walking in Hyde Park at precisely 10 o'clock each morning. Evangeline discovered a sudden need for daily constitutional walks at the exact same time. Their conversations started with the weather, safe, proper, forgettable. "The roses are particularly lovely this year," she might say. "Indeed," he would respond, "though I confess I've always preferred wildflowers to cultivated blooms. Wildflowers? They possess a strength that garden roses lack. They grow where they shouldn't, bloom despite harsh conditions, and somehow make beauty from the most unlikely circumstances." Was he speaking of flowers, dear listeners? Or was he speaking of something else entirely? Their talks grew longer, more intimate. He told her about his travels, painting pictures of distant lands with words that made her eyes shine with longing. She shared her love of books, not the approved novels for ladies, but history, philosophy, poetry that would have scandalized her family. "You have a remarkable mind," he said one morning, the words slipping out before he could stop them. "My family would disagree," she replied with a bitter laugh. "They find my mind one of my many failings." "Then your family," Adrian said quietly, "doesn't deserve you." The words hung between them like a promise neither dared to acknowledge. But London society has eyes everywhere, and tongues that wag with the persistence of church bells. Lady Pemberton saw them first, walking too slowly, talking too intently, looking at each other as though the rest of the world had faded away. "Mark my words," she declared at her weekly tea gathering, "that odd Duke is setting his sights on the Ashworth girl. Though why he'd choose such a frail little thing is beyond comprehension." "Perhaps," suggested Mrs. Worthington with a meaningful look, "he prefers women who won't challenge his foreign ways. Oh, how cruelty disguises itself as concern." The whispers spread like wildfire through ballrooms and drawing rooms. Soon Evangeline's family heard the speculation, and their reaction was swift and merciless. "Absolutely not," her father declared, pacing his study like a caged lion. "I won't have my daughter made a laughingstock by some ... foreign upstart," her mother supplied helpfully. "He's a duke, Papa," Evangeline said quietly, though her heart was breaking with each word. "A duke who'll tire of you within a month," her father snapped. "You're not strong enough for a real marriage, Evangeline. Accept the match with Mr. Whitmore. He's kind, he's English, and he'll treat you like the delicate flower you are. Delicate flower." The words that had haunted her entire life now being used to cage her heart. That evening at Lady Morrison's ball, Evangeline appeared in a gown of pale blue that made her look more ethereal than ever. But Adrian, watching from across the ballroom, saw what others missed: the rigid set of her shoulders, the way she held herself as though she might shatter. He made his way to her, navigating through the crowd with the fluid grace that marked all his movements. "Lady Evangeline," he said, offering a perfect bow. "Might I have the honor of the next dance?" The ballroom fell silent. Every eye turned to watch. And Evangeline, sweet, fragile Evangeline, lifted her chin and placed her gloved hand in his. "The honor would be mine, Your Grace. Have you ever danced a waltz that felt like flying?" As Adrian led Evangeline onto the floor, the orchestra struck up a melody that seemed written just for them. His hands settled at her waist with reverent care, as though she truly were made of spun glass. But when she looked up into his eyes, she saw something that made her breath catch. He wasn't treating her like she was fragile. He was treating her like she was precious. "You're troubled," he said quietly as they began to move. The words were for her alone, lost in the swirl of music and silk. "My family believes I'm too delicate for certain ... attachments," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "And what do you believe?" The question caught her off guard. When had anyone ever asked what she believed? "I believe," she said slowly, finding courage in his steady gaze, "that flowers can be both delicate and strong. That sometimes the most beautiful things grow in the most unlikely places." Adrian's hand tightened almost imperceptibly at her waist. "And I believe," he replied, "that those who cannot see your strength are blind to your true beauty." They danced as though the world might end when the music stopped. Every turn, every step, every shared breath felt like a revelation. But the watching eyes of society saw only what they expected to see: a cold duke amusing himself with a fragile debutante who would surely wilt under real passion. How wrong they were! When the music ended, Adrian bowed over her hand with ceremonial precision. But just before he released her fingers, he did something that made her heart stop. He pressed the lightest of kisses to her knuckles, his lips lingering just a moment longer than propriety allowed. "Thank you," he said, "for the most beautiful dance of my life." And Evangeline, who had spent 8 years believing she was too weak for anything meaningful, felt strong enough to conquer the world. What followed was a courtship conducted in shadows and whispers. Adrian couldn't call upon her openly. Her family had made their disapproval clear. But he was a duke, and dukes, dear listeners, have resources at their disposal. The letters began arriving hidden in poetry books from the lending library, tucked between the pages like pressed flowers. "My dearest Lady Evangeline, I find myself thinking of wildflowers again today. There is one in particular that grows in the most impossible places: rocky soil, harsh winds, scorching sun. Yet it blooms more beautifully than any hothouse rose. Its strength lies not in its shelter, but in its refusal to be diminished by circumstances beyond its control. I thought you might like to know that such flowers exist. Most respectfully yours." Her letters in return revealed a mind that sparkled like cut crystal. "Your Grace, I have been researching wildflowers in Papa's botanical books. Did you know that the alpine forget-me-not grows at altitudes where other flowers cannot survive? It seems that sometimes what appears to be delicate is simply selective about where it chooses to bloom. Perhaps some flowers need the right gardener to help them find their strength. Your devoted correspondent, through these secret letters, they shared their souls. Adrian wrote of his childhood, of being different in a world that prized conformity, of learning to hide his heart behind perfect manners and social grace. Evangeline revealed her dreams, not the simpering wishes her family expected, but deep yearnings to travel, to learn, to matter in a world that saw her only as ornamental. I dream of seeing the places you've described, she wrote, not as a tourist seeking comfort, but as an explorer seeking truth. Is that terribly unwomanly of me? It is, he replied, utterly magnificent. But secrets, dear ones, have a way of revealing themselves at the worst possible moments. It was Evangeline's maid who betrayed her, not from malice, but from fear. The girl was caught with one of Adrian's letters, and under pressure from Lady Ashworth, she revealed everything. The confrontation was swift and merciless. "How dare you?" her father thundered, pacing his study while Evangeline stood frozen before his desk, carrying on a clandestine correspondence with that foreigner. "He's a duke, Papa. He's unsuitable." Her mother's voice cut like a blade. "Did you think we wouldn't discover your shameful behavior? The entire town will be laughing at us." "I love him," Evangeline said quietly, and the words fell into the room like stones into still water. "Love?" Her father's laugh was harsh. "Child, you know nothing of love. You know nothing of the real world. You're too fragile, too naive, too ... double quote. He paused, searching for the word that would cut deepest. "Too weak for a man like that." Each word was designed to wound, and they found their mark. But something strange happened as Evangeline stood there, absorbing blow after blow. She didn't break. Instead, she felt something unfurling inside her chest, something that had been sleeping, waiting, gathering strength. "Perhaps," she said, her voice steadier than it had ever been, "you don't know me as well as you think." Her father's eyes narrowed. "You will end this foolishness immediately. Tomorrow you will accept Mr. Whitmore's proposal." "The arrangements have already been made." "No." The word hung in the air like a sword. "I beg your pardon." "I said no, Papa. I will not marry Mr. Whitmore. I will not pretend to be the weak, wilting flower you believe me to be. And I will not abandon the only man who has ever seen my true worth." The silence that followed was deafening. Then her father's voice, cold as winter. "Then you are no daughter of mine. Have you ever stood at the edge of a cliff, knowing that stepping forward means either flying or falling?" Evangeline packed her few precious belongings that night, her books, her mother's pearl necklace, and every letter Adrian had written her. She had no plan, no destination, only the certainty that she could not live a lie. But Adrian, it seemed, had been making plans of his own. She found him waiting in the garden at dawn, his traveling clothes suggesting a journey, his eyes holding a mixture of determination and desperate hope. "I cannot offer you an easy life," he said without preamble. "Society will whisper. Your family has already disowned you. I am not what England considers ideal." "And I," Evangeline replied, stepping toward him with newfound courage, "am not the fragile flower they believe me to be." "No," Adrian breathed, reaching for her hands. "You are wildfire in silk gloves. You are starlight masquerading as candle flame. You are everything I never dared to dream I might find." "Then ask me," she whispered. "Ask you what?" "What you came here to ask me." Adrian dropped to one knee in the dewy grass, pulling a ring from his pocket, not the massive diamond expected of a duke's proposal, but a delicate band set with forget-me-nots carved from sapphire. "Lady Evangeline Ashworth," he said, his voice rough with emotion, "will you do me the extraordinary honor of becoming my wife?" Will you let me spend my life proving that strength comes in many forms and that love sees beauty where others see only what they expect to see? Yes, she said, the word carrying all her dreams, all her courage, all her newfound strength. Yes, 1,000 times yes. He slipped the ring onto her finger, then rose and pulled her into his arms. And there, in a garden kissed by morning light, they shared their first kiss, tender at first, then deeper, filled with all the passion and promise of two souls recognizing their perfect match. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard, both transformed. "Where will we go?" she asked. "Anywhere you wish," he replied. "I've estates in Scotland, a villa in Italy, connections in Paris. The world is vast, my love, and it's waiting for us to explore it together." "Together," she repeated, tasting the word like wine. Always together. 3 weeks later, in a small chapel in Scotland, because sometimes the most important moments require the simplest settings, Lady Evangeline Ashworth became the Duchess of Ravenshollow. She wore her mother's wedding dress, altered to fit her slender frame, and carried wildflowers instead of hothouse roses. Adrian wore his ceremonial uniform, every inch the commanding duke, but his eyes never left his bride's face. The ceremony was attended by a handful of friends who understood that true love rarely follows society's rules. No family members were present. The Ashworths had made their position clear. But when the vicar pronounced them husband and wife, when Adrian lifted Evangeline's veil and looked into her radiant face, it was clear that they needed no one's approval but their own. "You realize," he murmured as they kissed to seal their vows, "there's no going back now." "I don't want to go back," she replied against his lips. "I only want to go forward with you." Their wedding night, but some stories are too sacred for public telling. Let it suffice to say that Evangeline discovered reserves of passion she never knew she possessed, and Adrian learned that gentleness and strength could coexist in perfect harmony. Marriage, dear listeners, has a way of revealing truths about ourselves we never suspected. In the months that followed, as the new Duke and Duchess of Ravenshollow traveled through Italy and France, something remarkable happened to Evangeline. Away from the suffocating expectations of London society, she began to bloom like those wildflowers Adrian had always seen in her. She learned to really ride not the sedate side-saddle cantering approved for ladies. She studied art and history with passionate intensity. She spoke her mind in drawing rooms across Europe, charming intellectuals and artists with her quick wit and genuine curiosity. "You're not the same woman I married," Adrian said one evening as they walked along the Seine, her hand secure in his arm. Evangeline looked up at him with alarm. "Does that displease you?" "Displease me?" He stopped walking, turning to frame her face in his hands. "My darling, you are everything I hoped you would become and more than I dared to dream. You were never fragile, you were simply waiting for the right soil on which to grow." She had grown indeed. The pale, uncertain girl who once traced words on windows had become a woman of substance, grace, and quiet power. She spoke 3 languages fluently now, could discuss philosophy with scholars and politics with diplomats, and had developed a reputation for her charitable work among the poor of whatever city they called home. But perhaps most remarkably, she had learned to see herself as Adrian had always seen her, not as a delicate flower to be protected, but as a force of nature to be celebrated. After 2 years abroad, social and political obligations called the Duke and Duchess of Ravenshollow back to London. The woman who stepped from the carriage at Ravenshollow House bore little resemblance to the timid girl who had fled England as a disgraced daughter. This was a duchess in every sense of the word, poised, elegant, radiating quiet confidence. The ton naturally was agog. At their first social appearance, Lady Pemberton's spring ball, Because some ironies are too perfect to resist, all eyes turned to the legendary couple. "Good heavens," whispered Mrs. Worthington. "Is that really little Evangeline Ashworth?" "The Duchess of Ravenshollow," corrected Lady Morrison pointedly. "And yes, that's her. Though I dare say she's changed." Changed indeed. Evangeline moved through the ballroom like a queen, her golden hair now styled in a sophisticated chignon, her gown a masterpiece of Parisian couture that highlighted every curve she'd developed during her time abroad. But it was her bearing that truly commanded attention, the way she held her head high, the confidence in her smile, the intelligence that sparkled in her blue eyes like sapphires in sunlight. "Your Grace," Lady Pemberton gushed, approaching with barely concealed curiosity, "how wonderful to see you both again." "Marriage clearly agrees with you." "Indeed it does," Evangeline replied, her voice warm but carrying an undertone of steel. "I've discovered that I'm far stronger than anyone, including myself, ever imagined." Adrian, resplendent in evening dress, watched his wife navigate the social minefield with pride and adoration evident in every glance. When they danced that night, the same waltz they'd shared 2 years before, the entire ballroom fell silent again. But this time, it wasn't scandal they witnessed. It was perfection. The confrontation with Evangeline's family came, as these things do, at the most inconvenient possible moment. Lord Ashworth approached during a quiet dinner party at Ravenshollow House, his wife trailing behind him with the expression of someone attending her own execution. "Evangeline," he said stiffly, using her name for the first time in 2 years. "Papa," she replied calmly, not rising from her seat beside Adrian. "Mama, how unexpected. We've come to, that is, we hope double quotes her father's composure cracked slightly. "We've heard about your success, your charitable work, the respect you've earned in European courts. Have you indeed? We thought perhaps family differences might be set aside." The room fell silent. Every guest present understood they were witnessing either a reconciliation or a final severing of ties. Evangeline studied her parents for a long moment. These people who had spent 18 years convincing her she was too weak, too fragile, too insignificant to matter. Then she smiled, not with bitterness, but with something far more devastating: indifference. "I'm afraid you're mistaken about something, Papa," she said quietly. "I haven't changed to win your approval. I've simply become who I always was beneath the expectations you placed upon me. If you choose to see that as success, that's your decision. But I no longer require your validation to know my own worth." She turned to Adrian, who was watching her with unabashed admiration. "Shall we adjourn to the music room? I believe our guests would enjoy hearing that new piece from Vienna." As she swept from the dining room, her head high and her husband's arm supporting her, Lord Ashworth realized he had lost his daughter not when she defied him, but years before, when he first told her she wasn't enough. But life, dear ones, rarely allows us to rest on our laurels for long. The crisis came in the form of a letter, anonymous, venomous, and designed to destroy everything the Duke and Duchess had built together. "Your Grace," it read, "perhaps you should ask your wife about her correspondence with Lord Harrington during your recent travels. Some flowers, it seems, cannot resist the appeal of native soil." The letter was a lie, a carefully crafted piece of malice designed to exploit Adrian's deepest fears about his own worthiness. But lies, when they target our most vulnerable places, can feel more real than truth. For 3 days, Adrian carried the letter like a poison in his pocket. He watched Evangeline with new eyes, searching for signs of deception, of regret, of the inevitable disappointment he'd always expected. Evangeline, sensitive to every shift in his mood after 2 years of marriage, recognized the change immediately. "What's wrong?" she asked one evening as they prepared for bed. "Nothing's wrong," he lied, the words tasting like ash. "Adrian," her voice carried the quiet authority she'd developed. "In 2 years of marriage, you've never lied to me. Please don't start now." He handed her the letter without a word. Evangeline read it twice, her face paling with each word. When she looked up, her eyes were bright with unshed tears. "Do you believe this?" The question hung between them like a sword. "I don't know what to believe," Adrian said, and the admission cost him everything. What followed was the first real crisis of their marriage, not the external pressures they'd faced before, but something far more dangerous: doubt. Evangeline moved through the next days like a ghost of herself. She attended social functions, managed their household, conducted her charitable work, but the light had gone out of her eyes. Adrian watched his wife retreat behind walls he thought they'd torn down forever, and realized he was losing her not to another man, but to his own fears. The truth, when it came, arrived in the form of Lord Harrington himself. Ravenshollow. The elderly gentleman said, cornering Adrian at his club, "I hear there's some nonsense circulating about correspondence with your wife." Adrian tensed. "Indeed. Thought you should know. I'd been in Bath for the past 6 months, taking the waters for my gout. Haven't been to London at all. Whoever's spreading this poison is using my name falsely. Do you have any idea who might—" "Mr. Whitmore," Harrington said bluntly. "The man your wife was supposed to marry. Been drinking heavily since your return, talking about how she belonged with her own kind. If you ask me, he's the sort who'd see destruction as preferable to defeat." Adrian felt the world shift beneath his feet. Not with relief, though that was there, but with horror at what he'd done. He'd doubted her. After everything, after 2 years of perfect love and trust, he'd let fear poison his heart. By the time he reached Ravenshollow House, Evangeline was in their bedroom, packing. "Where are you going?" he asked, though he dreaded the answer. "I don't know," she said without looking at him. "Away, somewhere I can remember who I was before I started needing your belief in me to feel whole. Evangeline, please." "I know the truth now. Harrington told me." "This isn't about the letter," she said, finally turning to face him. "This is about the fact that you read it and, even for a moment, believed it possible. After everything we've been through, everything we've built, you thought I might betray you. I was afraid," he said simply. "Afraid that you'd realize you deserved better than a man who will always be seen as foreign, different, not quite English enough. And I was afraid," she replied, her voice breaking, "that I was still the weak, fragile thing my family believed me to be. That when tested, I'd crumble back into nothing." They stood there 6 feet apart, both wounded, both afraid, both desperately in love. Sometimes, dear listeners, the most important conversations happen in the smallest moments. Adrian crossed the room slowly, as though approaching a wounded animal. "I have been a fool," he said quietly. "Not because I doubted you, but because I forgot the most important truth of our marriage, which is that we chose each other not despite our fears, but because of them. You married a man who will always be different, always be questioned, always be seen as other. I married a woman who was told she was too fragile for real love. We are both perfectly imperfect, and that's what makes us perfect for each other." Evangeline's eyes filled with tears she'd been holding back for days. "I don't want to be afraid anymore," she whispered. "Neither do I," he said, reaching for her hands. "So let's make a pact. Let's promise that when the world tries to convince us we don't deserve this love, we'll remind each other that we do. That we chose it, fought for it, and built it with our own hands. What if I'm not strong enough? Then I'll be strong for both of us until you remember your own strength. And if you forget you're worthy of love, then you'll love me until I remember I am. She flew into his arms then, and they held each other as though they were drowning and each other was air. I love you, she sobbed against his chest. I love your differentness, your otherness, your perfect imperfection. I love that you see wildflowers where others see weeds. And I love you, he replied, his own eyes wet with tears. I love your strength disguised as fragility, your fire disguised as silk, your magnificent heart disguised as delicacy. You are my perfect match in every way that matters. They made love that night with desperate tenderness, reclaiming each other, rebuilding trust with every kiss, every caress, every whispered word of love. And in the morning they woke renewed. 1 year later, the Duchess of Ravenshollow stood in the garden of their country estate, watching her husband play with their 6-month-old son, a beautiful child with his father's, dark hair and his mother's blue eyes. He has your stubborn streak, Adrian called out, laughing as little James grabbed at flower petals with determined fists. And your charm? Evangeline replied, settling beside them on the blanket. Look how he's flirting with that butterfly. They made quite a picture, the foreign duke, the formerly fragile Duchess, and their perfect blend of a child, surrounded by wildflowers that grew in impossible abundance. Do you ever regret it? Adrian asked quietly as James dozed against his chest. The scandal, the ostracism, the difficulty of loving someone like me? Evangeline looked at her husband, this man who had seen her true self when no one else bothered to look, who had loved her into becoming everything she was meant to be. My darling, she said, reaching up to cup his cheek, I would choose you in every lifetime, in every story, in every possible version of our tale. You taught me that strength isn't about never bending, it's about choosing to grow despite the storms. And you taught me that love isn't about being perfect for each other, it's about being perfectly imperfect. Together, as the sun set over their garden, painting everything gold, they sat in comfortable silence, their child safe between them, their love stronger for having been tested. The tongues still whispered about them, of course, but they whispered about the Duke and Duchess who had defied convention and found perfect happiness, who supported causes and championed the underdog, who proved that love could indeed conquer all when it was built on mutual respect, understanding, and the courage to see each other clearly. And there you have it, darlings, the tale of Lady Evangeline and the Duke of Ravenshollow, two souls who found in each other everything the world told them they couldn't have. But tell me, as you listen to this story, what speaks to your heart? Is it the reminder that strength comes in many forms? The truth that real love sees us as we truly are, not as others expect us to be? Or perhaps the beautiful reality that sometimes the most unlikely pairings create the most extraordinary love stories? I confess, as someone who has always believed that the best romances are about two people making each other brave, this story fills me with the most delicious warmth. Because isn't that what we're all looking for? Someone who sees the wildflower where others see only a weed. Now, my dear ones, if this tale of Regency romance has swept you away to ballrooms and gardens, if it's made you believe in the power of love to transform and heal, then I have a small favor to ask. Please subscribe to this channel so we can continue these journeys together into worlds of passion, drama, and happily ever afters. Give this video a thumbs up if it made your heart flutter, even just a little. And do tell me in the comments which character spoke to your soul. Fragile but fierce Evangeline or the armored but tender Adrian? Better yet, Share this story with someone who needs to remember that love isn't about being perfect. It's about being perfectly imperfect for each other. Until our next romantic adventure, remember, you are stronger than you know, worthy of the greatest love, and perfectly positioned to bloom exactly where you're planted. Now go forth and find your own wildflower love story, darlings. The world is waiting for you to write it. With all my love and romantic wishes, your devoted storyteller,